It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Anthony J. Faso, CPA. He's a family man, Army veteran, author, real estate inventor, and self-proclaimed recovering CPA. He started his career working for PricewaterhouseCoopers, then was a CFO for a chain of restaurants. Eventually, he was tired of making others wealthy, and he started his first business, a CPA firm specializing in dentists and real estate investors. After the Great Recession, he saw the advice his clients were receiving from typical financial planners, and himself only made Wall Street rich at the expense of his clients. That inspired Anthony's journey to find an alternative to typical financial planners. After years of research and trying different strategies himself, he started Infinite Wealth Consultants, which combines the teachings of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad with Nelson Nash's infinite banking concept. He teaches his clients to create passive income so they can work because they want to, not because they have to. And by the way, I was all excited about this because he posted a blog on Dental Town with Dr. Dick Dykeman, DDS, who's an orthodontist in my backyard. And I mean, I met Dr. Dykeman, I think in 87 is the first time he came over to my house. We had dinner. Just one of the greatest guys in the world. And he's an orthodontist, MS, DDS. And he's all on board on all this stuff too. And before I let Anthony start talking, I'm going to tell you everything he's not going to tell you about financial planning. Okay, the number one cause of divorce is marriage, so don't get married and you'll have no alimony. And you don't have to save up for your kids' college tuition if you just don't have any kids. So just, if you're still in dental school, stay single, never get married, never have a kid, and you don't even have to watch the rest of the podcast. You can turn it off now and go to Housewives of Miami. Anthony, isn't it true that the number one draining of all cash is marriage, children, divorce, and college? So why don't you just stop this before it starts?
You left me speechless, Howard. First, I'd like to say it's an honor to be on your podcast. I first got connected with Dental Town in 2005, I believe, or I'm not sure, but it was a long time ago. And it was, at that point, it was a smaller community, right? But then I got reconnected, and what you have, the platform, the questions, the podcast, hats off to you to building this community. You're adding a lot of value. To answer your question, you're right. I'm not going to talk about not having kids or getting married. One thing I would talk about, what's going to hurt you financially, is also taxes can be a big destroyer of wealth, and so can the capital losses or losing money in investments. So it's important that we manage our tax planning, and also ideally we don't want to lose money.
Yeah, and I don't even know where to start with this, because when it comes to money, first of all, people are rational when they're doing algebra and geometry and trig. They're very rational. But man, when it starts getting into money, they get so emotional and so irrational. And we're in the middle of an election. I mean, this is what is today? Wednesday? Is today Wednesday?
Yeah.
So next week we're having an election. And I mean, it's so crazy because I don't want to talk about religion, sex, politics, violence, but like a lot of the ads are like, oh, if you vote for this guy, he'll raise your taxes. Dude, you add $1 trillion of debt a year. You're 19 trillion in debt. And now you're like, oh my God, if you vote for this guy, he's going to pay his bills. And then when you look at financial, like I know dentists who are throwing the Hail Mary pass. They got everything on Tesla. And it's like, you know, that Tesla isn't going to save you because you eat out 3 nights a week. You drive a Range Rover. You bought a house up north, and this year you've only spent 3 weekends in there. It could have been an Airbnb, but it just seems like dentists, physicians, and lawyers, they just spend more than they make. And every time I talk to a dentist, I say, okay, vacation. You just go to the lake and fish and drink a case of beer like everyone else? Oh, no, I went to Hawaii and we took a cruise. Okay, car, do you just have a Toyota? Oh, no, I have a Range Rover. House, just a 2,000 square foot, 4-bedroom, 3-bath. No, it's a 5,000 square. I'm like, dude, your wife's wedding ring is 3 carat. Can you just show me anything you do in the median? And they can't show me any part of their life where they don't spend more than they have. So when I look at your Infinite Wealth podcast, I mean, I don't think they could invest enough money on earth to keep up with their spending. So how do you coach people to live within their means in a country where people won't vote for you if you're accused of paying your bills? Yes, we'll actually raise taxes to pay for this war we started 19 years ago. What? Yeah, isn't that just on borrowed money?
Right. And you're right. And unfortunately, that's not just dentists or physicians. Unfortunately, that's a lot of high income earners in this country. There's so much easy access to credit, and we have that satisfaction. We can get that Range Rover just like that. If you want a vacation house, you want to do anything, it's that immediate gratification. And I would say that's very difficult to overcome. So some of the ways to do that is I recommend my clients write out their goals. And a lot of people will talk about goals. Well, I want this net worth or this when I retire. I like to have lifestyle goals. Like, what does your life look like in 10, 20 years? How many hours are you working? How much? I tell you, I want people to travel and to enjoy life as long as they're doing prudently and they are planning for it. But if they can write out their goals, and maybe their goal is like one of my clients, his wife worked part-time and her income was $3,000 a month. And one of his goals is that he wanted to, without taking a step back financially, be able so his wife could stay home with the kids, which is great. But part of what we did, some things we cut out, but more importantly, what we want to do is we want to create passive income. So in this particular situation, we bought some rental properties that were producing some cash flow. So eventually we got that cash flow up enough. And also a couple things, we're paying a lot of money in taxes when you are an employee. Real estate has a lot of tax advantages, particularly in those first couple of years. So we didn't need to replace exactly $3,000. The number was a little bit closer, about $2,100. And when he had that goal and he could say, okay, we could accomplish this in 2 to 3 years, that gave them purpose. And it gave them a goal and something to look at, and also a plan to follow. Because a lot of times we have this money coming in, but if we don't earmark or have a plan of what we're going to do with it, a lot of times it just gets spent in lifestyle. We got the Range Rover. We're going to Starbucks every day on our way to work.
Usually when you ask a dentist, how do you plan on fighting poverty? He says, I just beat up homeless people. But do you think a lot of it's culture? Because I noticed that in, when different families, like some kids, when they're 10, you give them a Benjamin, you give them $100, and you can come back and a year later, he still has it. I mean, I've done this test on so many kids or whatever. And then you give a $100 Benjamin to other kids, and before you leave, they go to the mall and they trade that in for a pair of blue jeans. And you're just like, and then you have this long talk with this kid. And then the next time you see him, the same thing happens. And I'm just convinced that the most obvious IQ test is how long it takes you to part with your money. And you start seeing this behavior in young kids, and psychologists have identified it as delayed gratification. And children that understand the concept of delayed gratification before they're 10, they just do better. I mean, that's why they're a doctor, because, you came out of high school, all your other friends were getting married and getting jobs at Boeing and getting fancy cars, but you decided to stay a student for 8 years because you knew it was a better decision when you're 30 or 40. So do you think if you're you're born in poverty, you're going to stay in poverty? I mean, do you think do you think how the culture you were born is going to be a big factor in all your culture and values to determine whether or not you're going to be able to save money?
I think that's part of it. I would say I wouldn't say I grew up poor, but I didn't have a lot of money. But what that allowed me to be is driven to make money and to be a good steward of it. So sometimes people are poor and they may just have that poor mindset. And sometimes even with these rich kids, I will tell you a funny story, Howard. I remember distinctly when my son, he wanted an Xbox. And I don't remember how much they were back then, but he was smart enough. You look at the Best Buy flyer and say, hey, Dad, you know what? There's 0% interest. So if you buy it for me now, and then you just take my allowance and pay that towards the bill within a year, I'll have the Xbox now, and I will forego the allowance for the next year. And that's when it clicked into me, is like how he's learning about that immediate gratification. And it wasn't something that we had instilled. It's something that he's learning and reading. And so a lot of what we're influenced by is how we're raised. But that doesn't mean it's permanent. There's got to be some passion or a will to make a change. And that's something that is difficult to do. That's something that has to be internal. And so that's why, as I'd said earlier, about focusing on the goals. And if you want them bad enough, you are going to you're going to get them. And also that helps you when making a decision to do A or B. I always say, well, let's go back to your goal. Which one of these is going to help you achieve your goal? And if neither one, then don't do it. But to me, it's all about setting some goals and having a path or a strategy to follow.
So why do you call yourself a recovering CPA?
Well, I would tell you, when you meet somebody, just by human instinct, you're going to put them in a category. All right, people will ask you, well, what do you do? Well, okay, I'm a dentist. And they have this perception of you. Or if you had to put me in a category, I don't do CPA work anymore or taxes. If you had to put me in a category, it would be a financial advisor. The problem with that is when you think of a CPA, you're probably thinking a nerd, right? Or somebody who's very analytical. And when you think of a financial advisor, you're probably thinking mutual funds, 401k. But I try to be that I'm not either. I'm not neither. I'm not a nerd. I mean, some people might say I am. My wife calls me a nerd. Right now, I'm trying to solve the Rubik's Cube. But I do have nerd hobbies. But financial planning, I'm not what typically people are going to think of when they say financial advisor. So recovering CPA, I found, first of all, when I say it, a lot of times people will chuckle, and they're going to ask more of, well, what does that mean? So I do that to distinguish myself and add a little humor, and potentially maybe that'll bring some more questions of really what we do and how we help people.
You know, my friend solved the Rubik's Cube the first time he ever saw it almost instantly. And yeah, he's colorblind, and it really helps. When what are you trying to do when you're not doing the CPA, you start this infinite wealth? What would you say is the nuts and bolts of your of what you do? Is it more motivational to get them to stop spending so much money? I mean, most dentists, if you want to hide something from them, you just put it in the oven. They only eat out. They don't know how to drive. They always have to fly. I mean, they want to learn like the smallest thing in dentistry. And it's like, okay, well, Dental Town has 400 one-hour courses that cost $36, and you can just learn it for $36, which is cheaper than taking a cab to the airport. They're like, no, I don't want to do it that way. I want to take a $70 Uber ride to the airport, fly 3,000 miles, stay in a 5-star resort, and go to a 2-day course for $3,000 to learn what they could have learned for $18. I mean, it's just like they go massively out of their way to spend money. So what are you trying to do? Because I know you have, I go to your website, infinitewealthcourse.com, infinitewealthconsultants.com. By the way, which one of those sites should they go to first? Should they go to infinitewealthcourse.com, or should they go to infinitewealthconsultants.com?
Infinite Wealth Consultants is our homepage. That's where you learn some more about us, and you can see our blog and our podcast. The Infinite Wealth course is we have created a online course of, I don't know, maybe there's about 50 videos in there, but of various topics, ways to create passive income. One of my favorites is, should I get a 15 or a 30-year mortgage? And we do the math behind it to support which one is better. So there's videos on there about personal finances, but also ways to create passive income, ways to start.
Okay, well, you can't say that about the 15 or 30-year mortgage, then just leave it hanging in the air. Now you got to explain it. So okay. What's the answer?
Okay, well, let me ask you, Howard, what do you think is best, 15 or 30?
Well, again, it's so emotional. I've been having this talk with my, I got 4 boys now, and the thing I love the most about humans more than anything is they can just rationalize anything. I mean, my God, you just put on your cowboy boots, it's going to be a shit show, and, and the minute they start having kids, right, and the grandkids, I don't want to raise my child without his own chicken coop. I'm like, children have lived through tougher things than not having a chicken. By the way, I've never been this excited about Halloween with my grandkids because it's right now it's the 28th. So this is Wednesday the 28th. Halloween is 3 days. It's Saturday night. You know how many times I've done a practice run with my 4-year-old? Every time I see my 4-year-old, Raya, she wants to do a practice run, and we go to the house, and we go left, we don't go right, and then we turn at the mailbox, and then we walk straight to and she's always trying to sell it to me is that we need to go practice because she's worried that I'm going to get lost on Halloween night, and then she wants to go up to the door and ring the bell, and it's not Halloween. But if the garage door is open, someone's standing out there, I explained it so loud to her that they usually figure out what's going on and say, no, she can go up and ring the doorbell, because she even wants to walk up to the door and ring the doorbell. I mean, she's all into this practice, and we've done it like 12 times. So the house, from the way I got an MBA from ASU, and here's what they told us. Just for easy math, they say, okay, if a house is $100,000, say it's a 10% mortgage, it's 30 years, yada, 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 that if the mortgage payment is $1,000 a month on a 30-year loan, that house generally in the United States of America will rent out for about $850. So the difference is $150. So it's better to rent that house at $850, and then take the $150 difference and invest it in like an index fund. But then what they'll do is they'll go buy that house, and not only will they not rent and invest the difference, they'll go buy that house, and then, dentists, they work 4 days a week, and Friday they rest, Saturday they get bored, and by Sunday they get up and decide they're going to go to Home Depot and start a $5,000 bathroom project on, their house, and they just justify everything. I need to paint the house. I need to make a man cave. and it just becomes this huge money pit. And every time they get an extra $100, they can always rationalize on why it would be best to go to Home Depot and Lowe's and spend more money on that house. And that's what I was saying, the wife thing, the children thing, the house thing. I mean, you don't have a chance of saving money if you have married children and on love with a house. So in answer to your question, I would say, yeah, I get a 15-year mortgage instead of a 30-year mortgage, if it's just simple as that, because
Okay, sure.
the average American
why?
moves every 7 years.
So what's the advantage of a 15 over 30?
Well, you pay it off in half the time, because when the same government came out with the SBA loan, they only made that 24 years, because the economists were telling them that any loan over 24 years is interest only. So why would you have a 30-year mortgage on a house where the first 7 years are interest only in the same country where the people move houses every 7 years? So they're stuck on this interest-only plan, which, number one, they should just get rid of the 30-year mortgage and move it to the same length as the SBA. I mean, if the PhD economists say 24 years interest only, so yeah, I would say it should be a 24-year loan would be long, and a 12-year loan should be half.
Okay, right. So, and that's what most people think. A 15-year mortgage, I'm going to pay less interest, which is true. Okay, but we need to compare apples to apples. Your mortgage payment is going to be higher. Agreed? 15 over 30. So to compare the two, we have to account for that extra amount. Just to use round numbers, let's say the 15 years 1,000, right, and the 30 years 900. And I don't know if those are accurate, but just for simplicity, we have to account for that extra $100. Now, what we've done, and Howard, you're going to spoil it, so they're not going to watch the video, but that's okay. But I think it's going to add some value when you look at the math. But if you take that extra dollars of that extra payment of a 15 and you get a 30 instead, and that extra money you put into some sort of account, okay, you fast forward 15 years, as long as that account earns what the interest rate is on your mortgage, at the end of 15 years, the 15-year mortgage, the house is going to be paid off. The 30-year mortgage is going to have a balance, but you know what they're also going to have? They're going to have a side fund. And when you do the math, that side fund is equal to the loan balance at year 15. So what I tell people, it's never a bad idea to pay down your mortgage. Rarely is it the best idea. So what I'd rather have clients do, especially now, and in that example, we're not taking into account for taxes. Depending on where you live and the size of that house, that mortgage interest may be deductible. And if it is, then especially right now, interest is so cheap. I think I just got a loan for 2.75. I am in no rush to pay that off, because I can do something different, better with my money than to earn 2.75. Particularly if that 2.75 is taxable, maybe the net cost to me is, say, 2%. I would tell you, even if I couldn't make 2% on my side fund, to me, I want to have access to money. Particularly, like, we take a look at what happened in the last housing crash. A lot of people's value of the house got, the value went down. A lot of people were upside down. People were buying your neighbor's house for 50 cents on the dollar. If you have that side fund, have that liquidity, it's going to give you options. So let's say right now, maybe a lot of people's businesses are down or they've lost their job. Having that side fund of having access to that money can help you pay that mortgage if times are tough. Also, what I'm expecting in these next 2 years, there's going to be a ton of opportunities, whether it's in the housing market or whether it is buying another dental practice or renegotiating a lease or buying equipment or getting in the stock market, there's going to be some opportunities during this recession that we're in. And in order to take advantage of those, you need to have access to capital. And if that's tied into your house, I mean, you might have the equity, you might have the net worth, it might like good on your balance sheet. But the problem is, if you need access to that money, you have to ask permission. And what a good friend of mine had said, banks are like your neighbor that will loan you an umbrella when it's sunny out. But the moment it starts raining, they're like, hey, Howard, you know that umbrella I loaned you, I need it back. And you're going to be like, well, it's raining, I need it. They're like, I know, that's why I want it back. Banks only want to loan you money when you don't need it. So I'm not a big fan of tying up that having equity inside a house. I'd rather have it somewhere outside. Now, if you're getting closer to retirement, I think things are going to change. And what I also tell people, we can't make all of our decisions on math and numbers. I have some clients who it's very important for them to pay that house off. They don't want to have that mortgage. Well, you know what? Then we're gonna help them do it. We don't just help people focus on the bottom line. We want them to be happy and enjoy their life. And if whether that loan is a mortgage or a student loan, maybe financially it makes sense not to pay it off, but it's causing them stress. So then I think that there is value in making decisions not solely based on the dollar, but also on the stress and emotional aspect.
And you know the fastest way to transfer wealth ever created? Marriage. Marriage. That's all you got to do. You just got to marry it. It'll all be transferred to you. You never have to work again. I do remember money from back when I was young and single. But now with 4 kids and all that. No, I'm just kidding. But again, all this stuff, you know, it's just people work so hard for their money. And then another thing people say to me that's crazy, they're like, well, you know, money's not that important for me. Really? So you commute an hour to work each day, you work 8 to 5, you have an hour lunch at downtown, and then you get in 5 o'clock traffic. So you leave at 7 in the morning, get home at 6 o'clock at night, and money's not important to you, then why the hell don't you stay home? I mean, your grandma lives at home, you got grandkids at home, why do you go to work every day? I mean, it's so bizarre how some of the worst decisions people make are always about money, and it's so emotional, etc. Basically, I hate to ask you this question because, you know, there.
Go ahead.
You can't predict the future. I mean, you know, when you hear people telling you what the stock market's going to do for the rest of the year, they're a palm reader. I mean, there's no way. I mean, if you know who's going to win the Super Bowl, then call the NFL and let's cancel the game. I mean, we don't need to play it. I mean, because Einstein over here already knows who the winner is. I mean, you might have thought the Dodgers were going to win the World Series, but you sure as hell didn't know. But on the other hand, I'm 58. I graduated from high school in 1980, and that was Paul Volcker, the Fed Reserve Chairman. Interest rates were 21%, double-digit inflation, unemployment. Graduated from dental school in 87. Black Monday was that 133 days later. And then the Y2K build up and crash March of 2000, and then Lehman's Day. And I'm not a palm reader. I can't tell you who's going to win the Super Bowl. I mean, even though obviously it'll be the Arizona Cardinals, and if you don't believe that, there's something wrong with you.
Pittsburgh Steelers.
I hate the Steelers the most of all. We were in the Super Bowl. We were winning. It had 1 minute to go, and that idiot throws a Hail Mary, and some drunk Steeler catches it in the end zone. And oh my God. Our street went from Las Vegas casino style to just church mode in like 1 second. Oh my! I never seen my mother almost have a heart attack on the spot. But anyway, the bottom line is the crystal ball. I mean, it just smells like what's that Nirvana song? Smells like Teen Spirit. I mean, I'm sorry, but before the pandemic, you got to remember, Warren Buffett quit buying a year before the pandemic. All the newspapers and the Wall Street Journal saying, why is Buffett sitting on $150 billion? In fact, at one point, he had enough money to buy Costco just off the market. He could have just bought Costco. And he was like, no, this. And then the pandemic hit. So it was a long time ago since Lehman's Day, and then the pandemic hit, and now we hear that like 40 million Americans have lost their job, and my God, so I'm asking, a lot of people are just, they're thinking, the safest place for my money would be in a box under my bed. What do you think of the times that we're in, and how does this affected your long, illustrious career in investing over decades?
For what we're doing, times like this of uncertainty are great for our business, because what most people, I think, wrongly believe is that the only way to save for retirement is their IRA or 401k, or the stock market, which you've heard of the Buffett index, right? Where he analyzes the companies and they're hugely inflated. That's why he pulled out, because he's looking at these numbers. These companies, the stock prices are going up, but we have this double-digit unemployment. We have this rising deficit. Like something has got to give. And I believe one of the main reasons why the stock market is going up, even though when the economy is terrible, is because the feds are pumping money into the economy. And if you look at the graphs of the amount of money that the Fed is pumping into the system, and you overlay it with the stock market, it's on the exact same curve. And if you remember a couple of years ago, or was it a year ago, when the government said they're going to stop pumping money in, the stock market went down. And they're like, okay, wait a minute, we can't have that. So they started pumping more money in, and the stock market came back up. My concern is what happens when the government stops funding money into the economy. We are due for a crash. You just mentioned a bunch of crashes, and they happen about every 10 years. And right now we are on 12 plus. So we are due. I actually, on our podcast, in February, had an economist in there that predicted the recession was going to be in July. And he was basing that in large part of the inverted
yield curve.
Yeah. And that inverted yield curve has been before every last recession for the last 50 years. And that happened, I think, last August. So I don't think anybody would have been surprised if we're in a a recession, but you put this pandemic on there and it's only going to make things worse. And personally, I'm a free market guy. I think we need businesses and people, and the market will determine what interest rates are and what the value is of a house or of any asset. The reason why we have bubbles and bursts is when the government goes in there and starts inflating, keeping interest rates down like they're doing now, or they start manipulating the market. Eventually the market will reveal itself. And the longer they try to control things, the bigger the bust is going to be.
And I just want to add one thing. I love history. I love dentistry. I love economics, love history. And economically speaking, you always want to have the same hand as the superpower. So if the Roman Empire is storing all their money in gold coins, then gold's the best bet. Right now, the 20 richest countries all have about $40 trillion of debt, and half of that is just America. So when the 20 richest countries are holding $40 trillion in debt, you know that they're going to have an incentive for inflation. They're not going to pay interest on your savings account. I mean, when I was a little kid and opened up my first Johnny Appleseed account, I was explained banking in 5 minutes by the branch manager by my house, and he said, well, here's banking. You put in $1 and we will pay you a nickel every year till the end of time. And then if you ever need to borrow $1, it'll cost you a dime every year. So you give us your $1, we'll pay you a nickel a year, and we loan it out to someone else. We're going to loan it out to Anthony for a dime a year, and we make the difference. And now it's like, oh, that 5% per year? Yeah, that's 1% per year, because the government can't afford to pay 5 cents a year on $20 trillion of debt. So they've ran that down to, I mean, look at that. The interest rate at your bank is like 1.5%, and the Fed's target rate for inflation is 2%. So they're trying to dilute your money 0.5% every single year. So you got to know what side of the fence the 400-pound gorilla is on, and the government has been counterfeiting out of control since World War II, and it's paper, and that's why so many people they say they want gold. But I mean, I'm a dentist. I love gold. I have 7 gold fillings in my teeth, but it doesn't have a lot of utility. I mean, I can't eat gold. I can't wear it. I can't clothe it. I can't. But that's why I think people like rental properties, because a house is something physical. Everyone needs shelter. I would like, and the other thing, what I think is the most important is the political terms are weird. You go around the country and, like, if you say this person's on the left, this person on the right, that means something different in every continent that you're in. But the original word socialism meant that workers owned the means of their work. Like, I'm a farmer, and socialism means I want to own my land, and I know the king's going to come tax half my crop, but it's my land and it's my crop, and I'll give him some, as opposed to a landless indentured servant living on someone else's land. He doesn't own his land. They steal everything from him. And dentistry is kind of getting weird because the dentist are losing the means and the ownership of their production and deciding to go become employees in a DSO. And I have no sympathy for them, because these are the same bastards that got in bed with the government that took away the rights for a hygienist to open up her own office. And they always do it under, oh, well, it was for public safety. Okay, well, if you're into public safety, why don't we make transparent all the insurance data so we can see where in Phoenix, Arizona, we got 6,000 dentists. These 3,000 dentists, all their fillings lasted over 10 years. And these 3,000 dentists, they all lasted less than 10 years. I mean, so they're full of it. But freedom is freedom, and you should own your rights of production. And I think when the shit hits the fan and anything collapses, instead of having a stockpile of gold, I'd rather be able to go into Howie's dental office, and then here comes an old Blake named Anthony who can't sleep at night because he's got a toothache, and I can pull your tooth for a loaf of bread, and you're Italian, so I assume 3 bottles of wine. So I still think the best hedge on an economic, what happened in Venezuela, the best hedge is to own your means of production and be able to work, which leads me to your question. Why did you walk away from a sure thing at a CPA firm and start Infinite Wealth?
Well, I would say when 2008 hit, that, like many people, it really changed my life and my perspective. Particularly, I remember a client sitting down in front of me saying, Anthony, I did everything right. I paid off my house. I stayed out of debt. I paid off my credit cards, and I had extra money. I was paying down my mortgage. Now my house is worth half. My 401k is now my 201k. And you're telling me I need to go back to work, but I'm 70 years old. Who's going to hire me when they could hire a 50 or a 30-year-old? And that impacted me because I started looking, and he's following the same advice that I was following. And I, just like we talked about earlier, there's been a correction, they call it, about every 10 years. And I figured, unless I'm doing something different, why would I expect a different result? So I went around looking really mainly for myself, because part of me was, and even during that time, my son's 529 plan, which is a college savings tool, he lost 60%. My daughter was lucky, she only lost 50%. But my son was going to college in 2 years. We didn't have time to wait. So I started looking for alternatives to typical financial planning. And I noticed some of my clients not only didn't get hurt, they actually thrived. And so I sat down with them. Why are you doing something different? What books are you reading? What is your mindset? What sort of assets are you investing in? They weren't maxing out their 401k. They had access to money because they were the ones buying your neighbor's house for 50 cents on the dollar. But they were owning real estate. And really, the books that they were reading, I'd say one of the best is Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I'm sure most of your listeners.
He lives up the street. He lives up the street from me. He lives out here in Phoenix, in Paradise Valley.
Oh, this book is a game changer. I think it's an easy read, and I will tell you, I made my son read it, and while he's reading it, he called me and he's like, "Hey, Dad, I'm the poor kid." And I'm like, what? I first took it as an insult. I mean, we're not rich, but I wouldn't say we're not poor. But he's like, you know what? As soon as I get $1, I want to spend it, just like you were talking about. So I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I also read Nelson's Nash, Becoming Your Own Banker. So I started to incorporate these strategies personally, and then my clients were like, "What should I do?" They lost the trust in Wall Street, and a lot of times they didn't want to put money in their 401k and lock it up. They were business owners and they needed access to that capital. So I started sharing the strategies that I was doing. And then before I knew it, I had a growing tax practice. And then I also had a growing advisory practice. And I didn't want to be a jack of all trades, master of none. I wanted to be an expert in my sandbox. I wanted to be the best person in that sandbox. And I couldn't do both. So I had to choose. And to be honest, the choice was pretty easy. As much as I love taxes, and I'm sure a lot of your dentists can relate, I loved what I did. I loved meeting with the clients. I loved solving their problems. I did enjoy taxes. That's kind of the nerd in me. But the grind, I was burnt out. I mean, there's tax season, and then, in fact, a funny story, my daughter, when she was in elementary school, took a test on the seasons. She goes, all right, there's spring, summer, fall, winter, and tax, which at first was funny because she thinks tax season is one of the 5 seasons. But then I thought, that's not really that funny. I mean, I am working way too much. So I had to make a choice. So it was simple for me. I loved both. But I could see, the writing on the wall with taxes. Most people don't view their CPA as an asset. They view him or her as a necessary expense. But now kind of helping people achieve their goals, it's a lot more satisfying. And now I'm helping people. So that's why I sold my firm about 10 years ago.
And, again, what I love the most about humans is how they can just rationalize anything. I mean, my God. And the smarter they are, the more they know in math and physics and chemistry. Like, even in physics, where you think, okay, these are the guys that, I mean, you can't argue much about a cosine, a tangent. I mean, how do you fudge numbers? And you tell them a theory, and you tell them, you say, okay, now, you know your theory by Einstein. You know he said it breaks down. You know that he said it breaks down. It doesn't connect to quantum mechanics. Yeah, here they are, the guy's been dead for 50 years and they're still trying to connect, and they're like, well, what if you do? It's like, dude, you just can't accept no for an answer. And I see dentists on Dental Town. I mean, these are some wickedly smart dentists. And there's a thread going on. It's like 30,000 posts long called only 3% can retire at 65. Let me get, yeah. And what is the name of that thread? Yeah, 3% can retire at 60. And it started by Kenny72C, who's their legendary guru and all that, smarter than crap. But my God, I'm sitting here thinking, you're a dentist. Are you saving money? Are you investing money? Are you speculating money? I mean, how do people that know how to do a root canal and a crown, I mean, they're rocket scientists. What is it? What do you call it when smart people are rationalizing? I just say, like losing weight, eat less, move more. You want to get rich? Earn more, spend less. And they get so damn smart, they're savings, investing, and they're speculating. How do you tell the difference? What's your BS meter?
Well, what I would say, and one of my pet peeves is when someone says, knowledge is power, which knowledge is the potential power. You mentioned losing weight. If you want to know how to lose weight, pull up your phone. If you want to know whatever you want to know, it's now on the tip of your finger. There's a book, there's a podcast, there's a website to give you the knowledge. But not only do you need the knowledge, you need to take action. You have to put that knowledge into action. We all know to lose weight, we need to eat less and exercise. But knowing it isn't going to shred the calories. It's going to be taking action and doing it that is going to help you achieve those goals. And what I found, the more initials after somebody's name, the harder it is to teach them something, because they think they know it, right? And that happens with dentists. I mean, they do so much education, but how much of that deals with personal finance?
None.
Practically zero. And then even if there is a elective course at the school, a lot of them don't see value in it. They're not taking it. So they're educating and being an expert in their field, but we need to be experts or have some knowledge and take some action about our personal finances. All too much people, they don't want to get their hands dirty. They're going to just outsource, and they're going to give their money to somebody else to manage. And I tell you, Howard, the only time I lost money is when I gave it to somebody else. But when I had control of it and I determined the asset, and I didn't give it to somebody, I bought an asset directly, that's when I did not lose money. And you mentioned speculating. To me, there's a big difference. To me, words are important. And there's a big difference between investing and speculating. And also savings. I mean, we define savings as capital that you put that is liquid, it's safe, and is going to at least keep up with inflation, right? So we know it's never going to go down. Ideally, it goes up at least as much as what inflation is each year. And then investing is when we deploy capital, right, for a certain amount of time with the expectation that our capital is going to be safely returned, and we're going to get income in the form of either interest, rent, or dividends. The key thing is there's an expectation and a known amount, right? But then the third is speculating, and speculating is we deploy capital with the expectation it's going to appreciate. And oftentimes a lot of time that speculation or the appreciation is going to be hope. Well, the market's always gone up or it's done this. But I think if people really knew the difference between investing and speculating, and I think they would do and look for more investing purposes. And particularly right now, we recommend people invest in things that they know. And the number one investment is themselves. Taking the time to go through Dental Town, read these blogs, maybe post questions, whether that's taking classes, whether it's through Dental Town. There's the Las Vegas Institute here in Las Vegas. We want people to invest in their business. Whether that is ideally, instead of buying a mutual fund, what if you took a class that allowed you to do implants, or you created the knowledge to allow you to add an additional revenue source to your business, right? We've got some clients that are, I don't know if I can drop names, but a ULab, where now they're able to make their own imprints to do almost like in Invisalign, but that equipment costs money. But what I'd rather have somebody do, I believe it's maybe like 30 or 40 grand. Instead of putting 40 grand in your 401k, what if you bought an asset for your business? For one, now we can deduct that as depreciation, and we're creating additional revenue streams, which not only puts more money in our pocket, but it also creates our biggest asset, which is the practice. It makes that asset more valuable. So particularly in times like these, we want people to invest in things that they know, particularly if you have your own practice. I'd much rather have somebody invest in making that practice either cutting costs or bringing in more revenue. That's going to be more bang for your buck than speculating in an asset.
Okay, I need to hold your feet to the fire on this one, because I know my homies, and what they're asking is they just got out of school. They're starting to make some money. They got student loans, and they're like, okay, do I try to pay down my student loans faster? Should I be saving money to buy my own practice so I own my means of production? I got a house, and so the student loan thing is a crazy thing. So what do you make of that?
Well, I'm going to go back, and this might be the answer to a lot of my questions, is we got to go back to what the goals are of that new dentist. If the goal is to own the own practice, then let's make financial decisions that is going to expedite that. And I tell you, there's a lot of dentists who that student loan is just a huge pain or a huge monkey on their back. So maybe for them it might make more sense to pay it off. But if you're looking to own your own practice, paying off that debt is probably not the most important thing. That's going to be because you're going to have to pay those off completely before you have that free cash flow, and that may take 10, 15 years. What I would be more apt, the first thing I'd want people to do, and it's not sexy, but people need to have a reserve fund / opportunity fund. We need to have access to cash, particularly people are seeing in times right now where there is a loss of revenue. So we need some cash so we don't have to go into debt. Also, there's going to be opportunities. So what my saying is, the bigger the opportunity, the smaller the window there is to take advantage of it. So we need to have some liquid assets. And really, one option, instead of, let's say your you had 100 grand and you could pay off your student loans, right? Or you could buy an asset. You could, let's say, for example, buy, like for 100 grand, you could put the down payment on 4 rental properties. That cash flow that comes in, you could take that to pay your student loan payment. Then when that's paid off, your student loans are paid off, but now you also have an asset. So for some of those students, my advice would be is let's start building assets, and that may take precedent over student loans. But as we build those assets, ideally that produce cash flow, we can use that cash flow to pay down the debt. And also, and some other advice I'd give whether you're just starting out out of school, or maybe you just started your practice. You're in the lowest tax bracket you are ever going to be, particularly that first year or two, because you have the depreciation from all of that equipment. Also, you're trying to build your practice, so your gross collections are going to be the lowest they're ever going to be. So at that point, we want to make sure that we maximize the tax code. And a lot of times people are taught to defer their taxes by putting it in an IRA or 401k, which may have some benefit, and we're looking at that tax benefit. But the problem is we're not saving tax doing an IRA or 401k. We are delaying tax to a future time. And when you're in the lowest tax bracket, that's a time where you don't want to defer the tax. You want to pay it because it's going to be the cheapest it's going to be, whether that is not putting money in a 401k, or also one trap I see, particularly, and I'm going to give some blame to the CPAs. Their CPAs are typically designed, or their goal is to lower your taxes that day or for that year. And they can do that by putting money in an IRA, but also when you're buying that equipment, they may have you what's called Section 179, which allows you to deduct the full cost of that equipment in the first year, which sounds great. And that year, you are going to lower your taxes. The problem is, if you think your business is going to do better and make more money in the next couple of years, wouldn't you want to use that deduction when your income and your tax bracket's higher, as opposed to getting that tax deduction today?
My God, I can't believe we already went over an hour. I could talk to you 40 days and 40 nights. My gosh. Let me say, you got some time for some overtime questions?
No, I'm good, man. I love this. I can talk about this all day. So, yeah.
What do you, again, you've worked with so many dentists for so many years, and what I think is, the dentists, they all know themselves. They all know their house, their practice, but when I started Dental Town, I got to tell you a secret. When the internet came out, in 94, 95, everybody was going to say, well, it's going to have 5 C's. It's going to sell commerce and content and commercials and connectivity to all your devices. And the last one was community. And I thought, well, I'm a dentist. I don't care about supplies. My number one cost is the insurance adjustment I have to write between my $1,000 fee and that the $600 the insurance will give me. 35% of all the overhead of 95% of the dentists in America is their insurance adjusted fee. Next would be labor, 25%. Lab 10%, supplies 6%. Who cares about 6% supplies? I wanted community, And I didn't want to disintermediate that girl coming in my office because she was my only connection to the outside world before the internet. Like if I was looking at an endo file, I'd want to know what the great endodontist in my backyard. I'm like, well, can you find out what that endodontist is using, and what is Graybo and Matlow, what is Gettleman using, what is Jason Hell using? I mean, that was my connection to the outside world. And I firmly believe that dentists don't really have a good report card of what the other there's 211,000 licensed dentists alive in America today. 150,000 of them practice more than 32 hours a week in general dentistry, 30,000 more than 32 hours a week in a specialty. You get to see lots of them. They only get to look at the person in the mirror. What do you think are their most common financial mistakes? What do you think that most of them do, whether they're even consciously aware of it or not?
What I would say is, for one, it's spending, right? And you'd mentioned it before. Is living outside of our means and not having some proper savings, right? And so one way to combat that, I mean, it's simple. Well, like what your neighbor Robert Kiyosaki says: pay yourself first. We got to prioritize where our money goes. So we need to start paying ourselves first. What I also see is people are speculating. People want the home run. They want that stock that is going to shoot up, or maybe they buy into some startup, or they're looking for the home run. And what I tell people is, let's focus on hitting singles. Now, singles aren't sexy. You hit a single, you're at bat 3 times and you have 0 runs. But now the bases are loaded. Now every time you're hitting a single, you are bringing in a run. So my advice would be is, let's not go for the home run. Let's look and invest in things that Also, I think people focus too much on net worth. They want to be worth $1 million, or they want that a value or that account to be $1 million or $2 million. What I would challenge people is, well, why do you want to have $5 million? If you really pull back, it's because they want to live a certain lifestyle. But that's going to take cash. That's going to take cash flow. So why not invest in assets that are creating cash flow as opposed to a net worth? I also think people underutilize and overemphasize their CPA. And I can say that because I am a recovering CPA, but a lot of times there's a disconnect of what people think their CPA is doing and what their CPA is actually doing. And in my view, there's three areas of expertise in the CPA world. One is tax preparation, which is reactive, right? And then the second is tax planning, which is being proactive. And then the third is going to be audit defense, which is just simply keeping you out of jail, right? But most CPAs, it's just like I said, each one of those categories are very specific. And most of them, most people who are great preparers are not great planners. So as you're going to see, as your income goes up, and our tax rate is progressive, which means the more you make, the more they take. So we need to manage and be prudent with how we do our financing relating to taxes. And a lot of times people think their CPA is giving them advice, but the problem is if they only meet their CPA like right before the deadline, it's too late to get advice. Like they need to get that planning during the year, but there's miscommunication or expectation that these CPAs are proactively looking out for them. And the CPAs are good and they mean well, but there's so many tax returns that they're just being very reactive. You need to find a CPA, or sometimes, like with our high-end clients, we don't go to their CPA. We use a special tax strategist where all they do is tax planning. That way they can make sure that their structure is correct and that they're truly maximizing the tax code. And again, I would say a lot of times people are locking up their money in their 401k. And ideally, I think that investing in yourself and things that you know are going to produce more rewards. And if we look at, like with Robert Kiyosaki, I mean, which he inspired my goal, is he talks about financial freedom. And I hear a lot of people talk about financial independence, but what does that truly mean? A lot of times people haven't defined what that means. And Robert Kiyosaki has, and he defined it as your passive income, meaning income you're not actively working for, is more than your monthly expenses. And if you can do that, or when you do that, then you work because you want to, not because you have to. So that's where the goal is very important. Do you want, if you enjoy grinding in the chair and want to do that till you're 65, 67, then perfect, right? But if you want to be able to do more things, spend more time with the family, and work because you want to, not because you have to, we need to have that cash flow. So my advice would be start creating cash flow now and not wait till you're 65 or 69.
That was very, very well put. I can tell you from my own experience that when I, when I got to the point where I didn't have to work and I never had to work again, then it just makes it so much more fun. Like, one of the reasons I have never sold my practice is for the very simple reason of, number one, when my grandkids need to go have dentistry done, I'm going to have a dental office. Number two, I thought in my McMansion, I would just put an operatory in there if I sold it. But then you realize you got to put in an autoclave, air compressor. Then you realize that you don't even know how to turn on the autoclave or the air compressor. And in fact, I don't even have a key to my dental office or Dental Town, because I would never go to Dental Town unless I met the assistant there with a patient. And for emergencies, you want her to go down there with her big husband. And so I actually keep a dental office for my hobby, which is for, but it makes money, it's great, all those things like that. But I'm just telling you that when I hear these dentists and they're burned out and they're fried and they're suffering from depression and this pandemic's making it worse, they don't realize that it all comes back to their lifestyle. When they go buy a Range Rover, they just said to themselves, I'm going to trade 3 years of my flesh and blood doing fillings for this car. Well, so here's the psychological thing I can assure you. When you go to the store and they said, hey, we'll give you an $85,000 Beamer. All you got to do is sign here. Well, who doesn't want to sign there? Because you got to drive home in a Beamer. But when you save up and you have $80,000, you don't go buy a Beamer. And I'll tell you how everything flips. When you see my Lexus, I bought it in 2005. It's still perfect. It's got 180,000 miles. But the back door, there's a dent in the side of it. And people always say to me, like, what happened? And why don't you get that fixed? In fact, why don't you get a new car? Well, I was backing out of my driveway, and my precious granddaughter opened the door for some God knows what reason and bent the door back. And I told her, don't worry. And I got out and I just, body slammed it back, and there's dent on. Every time I see that dent, I always think of my little perfect, beautiful granddaughter, 3 years old, opening the door while Grandpa's backing out. And she started to cry. She all freaked out. And I said, hey, is anybody hurt? I don't care if the door's bent. I don't want your arm to get bent. But the point is if there's any dentist watching this show other than Rick Workman, who has $1 billion from Heartland, I mean, I could go buy a new Beamer tonight. I could buy 10 of them. I could buy a dozen of them with what's in my checking account. But that's why you have money, because when you have money, you won't part with it. But you'll part with owing it. Just sign here and you'll make payments on a 30-year mortgage. You'll make payments on a car. So it's kind of weird. Those people who have no money are the ones driving all the Beamers. And that's the difference between Scottsdale and all the surrounding suburbs. If you went to Scottsdale and you found 10 Beamers and Mercedes-Benz in a row, every one of them be leased, borrowed, or a mortgage. If you go out to the suburbs like Chandler or Peoria or, God forbid, Litchfield, no, out here, we're supposed to slam AJ. That's all the jokes and things. If you go out to Apache Junction and you see a Mercedes-Benz, it was paid for in cash. And you know what I mean? I mean, they just don't have debt. So all I want to tell my homies, and the reason I brought you on the show because I want you to upload some of your podcasts on Dental Town so they get the habit of watching this thing, because you have an incredible show. Oh, but last question. We went way over an hour. You did an episode with my buddy Dick Dykeman right here in my own backyard. Known orthodontist, great man for 30 years. Talk about that episode. You posted that on a blog in Dental Town. I tweeted out. Tell us about Dick Dykeman. Did you go there because you were trying to straighten your teeth?
No. Actually, Dick pointed out that I have something wrong with my smile and that he could help fix it. But I would tell you, I have the utmost respect for orthodontists, because when I grew up, I had a bad case of summer teeth. Right? Some are here, some are there. And Dr. Chin did some magic on these guys, right? But I guess according to Dick Dykeman, there was a little bit off. But what Dick has been using the concepts that we teach actually longer than I've been teaching it. So we wanted him to kind of come in here, and he explained what concepts we do and how he used it in his practice to maximize the cash flow in his practice, and also the money that he had outside and the impact that had on his long-term tax bill. So Dick is an amazing gentleman, an amazing story of how he came to this country, and he was a treat.
Where did he immigrate from?
I'm afraid you're going to ask me because I just forgot. Indonesia, is it?
Huh.
It's somewhere unusual.
Just a great guy. Just a great guy, smart guy. You know, like I say, he's got a dental degree, he's got a master's degree, he's an orthodontist. Just a really smart guy. You're a really smart guy, and I'm really honored that you came on the show. By the way, should we have Dick Dykeman come on the show like he did with you? And if he came on, would you want to come with him? Would that be more magical, or any thought like that?
Well, Dick would be magical. I would love to be a part of it. But yeah, I will talk to him. He was excited that I was on. And
if you guys want to come back, because like I say, I'm not a palm reader. I'm not predicting the future. I'm not going to tell you who's going to win the Super Bowl. But the two rules about bubbles is, number one, they get bigger than anybody ever thought they would get, and they eventually pop. And my favorite economist is Joseph Schumpeter, the Austrian economist. And they asked him, they said, why do we have business cycles? And he goes, well, look who's making all the decisions. It's 8 billion wild monkeys who all lost their tail, and they're quite crazy. And after about every 10 years, all the bad decisions and stories, and again, people know they're aware of their own existence. They know they're intelligent, but they don't think of what's the opposite. Like, what does it mean to be a frog? Well, you know, we're aware of our existence because we can escape the total present reality. So a cat and a dog and a cow. In fact, the funniest joke I play on my grandkids is whenever we're driving down the road, I always tell the grandkids, do you know I can speak to cows? And they're like, Grandpa, can Grandpa really talk to cows? So I roll down the window and I yell as loud as I can, "Hey, cow!" And of course, all the cows turn and look because some big ape just yelled a big noise. And I see, they're all looking at Grandpa. They all know what I'm saying. And then you can really keep this going if they're 4 and under. I mean, you can stop the car and they'll actually, "Hey, I need all of you cows to come over here." Well, shit, they're bored to death in the middle of a farm field. They'll walk over and pay attention to you. But the bottom line is this. It's been a decade since Lehman Brothers, which was a decade after Y2K, which was a decade after Black Thursday. And I look at the deficit. You've been adding $1 trillion a year for 19 years, and he added $3 trillion in the second quarter this year. The market was already the Buffett index. Warren Buffett actually taught. In my freshman business class, I went to Creighton University, and he was buddies with the Creighton people. And this is how dumb I am. I can prove it. I was dumb. He came over. He spoke to our class, or Creighton School of Business, whatever. And you had to write up what you thought of it. And I was 1980. I was all excited, like, oh, he's going to talk about the Nifty 50 and Kodak and all that. He didn't own any of those stocks, and he's like, I don't own any of the Nifty 50, and if I can't write it down on a number, on a 5x7 recipe card with a number 2 pencil, I don't understand it. I don't understand Intel and all this stuff. And I thought, this is a dumb old man. Looking back, what I should have done is dropped out of Creighton, took my next year's tuition of $6,000, bought $6,000 of Berkshire Hathaway, and then went and worked at Taco Bell for 30 years, and now I'd be worth $100 million. And the bottom line is, when he talks about the Buffett index, he says, look, within each country, if you take all the publicly traded stocks, like for the United States, be the Wilshire 5000, that should be less money than the GDP. The publicly traded stocks aren't worth more than the country. It has to be less. And I've noticed whenever it gets down to 65, 70%, the stock market's going to go up. And I also notice if it gets over 100%, like it's 110, 115, 120, it's going to trend back down. But you couldn't have all the publicly traded companies in a country. How could it be mathematically more valuable than the whole damn country? And you know what that index is at right now today? 181%. I mean, when you're 58 and you saw Warren Buffett live in 1980, 40 years ago, this market, if you look at that market and say that looks normal, hopefully you're in grammar school, you're in high school, or you just dropped acid, or you're drunk. Because if you really have read any financial economics in the last 40 years, we are in crazy times and unprecedented times. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I don't remember any books about the stock market during the Spanish influenza. We've had 40 million people lose their job. And dentists, you got to remember, if you want more of something, lower the price or have someone else pay for it, like subsidize it. Don't tax it or regulate it. And if you want less of something, just raise the price. Like when you tell me you really love doing Invisalign, I'm like, okay, great. So what are you going to do about your price next year? We're at the end of 2020. What are you going to do? Well, I'm getting $6,500 for Invisalign. I think I'm going to raise it to $6,800. I'm like, I thought you just told me you like Invisalign. Well, if you want to do more of something, you would lower the price. How the hell did you come up with, raise an economic barrier to entry? In fact, let's call our government friend. Maybe they can regulate it and tax it. No. If you want to do more of it, lower the price. And if you truly love, and that's what I did with dentures, I did the opposite. The opposite of addition is subtraction. The opposite of multiplication is division. When you hate a procedure like dentures, I just kept raising the price. And I remember clear back in the 90s, when people would say, you charge $2,000 for a denture? I could get it at Denture World for $4.99. I'm like, ma'am, I'll drive your ass to Denture World right now. Let's get in the car, because I can't wait to see your ass get out of my car in Denture World, because I hated dentures. But when I had to do a denture and you're getting $2,000 for it, there's worse things that happen to you than making a denture for $2,000. So if you love it, lower your price. If you hate it, raise the price. But you need to get dialed up. make sure you don't have any debt floating on interest rates, because that's the main lesson of 1989. I graduated from high school. Farmers were buying John Deere tractors at 200 basis points over T-bills, and the next thing they know, they're paying 21% interest on a $100,000 tractor, and they lost the family farm. So you don't have floating debt. Number one, keep your means of production, because you can get fired and laid off when you work for someone else. But when you have your own taco stand, when you have your own taco truck, when you have a dental office, and you can go down there and sit by yourself with an iPhone, and when someone comes in with a toothache, pull it for yourself. When you own your means of production, that is where the word socialism comes from, and I'm sorry you didn't pick it up from centuries ago. It doesn't mean what you think it is. It means you have your rights of production. Now you're selling that off for pieces of paper to go be an employee at a DSO. Okay, that's not what I would have recommended. I always recommend that workers own their means of production, and it's actually fun to cook. I've actually, this pandemic, I can now make macaroni and cheese without reading the box. I know it's a full stick of butter, a half cup of milk, and with enough pepper, you can eat it. And, just live under your means, and no job is beneath your dignity. I cannot believe how many dentists tell me in Arizona they can't find a job. And I say, you can't find any place to hire dentists? Oh, yeah, if you want to go work in some Medicaid hellhole in South Phoenix where they're only paying you 20%. I'm like, dude, you just told me you didn't do a root canal on a live patient in dental school, and now you have an option to have more dentistry than you can do, but you'd rather sit home and be unemployed than working on some poor person that needs dentistry at a lower price. I mean, I thought it was an honor when I got out of school. I got out of school May 11. It didn't get my office built and open until September 21st. And there was a dental clinic called Sunshine Dental Clinic. And they were open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 7 days a week. So I got to work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for 4 months. Every week I did my dental school requirements of 50 fillings, 15 canals of endo, 15 units of removable. And so like every week I was doubling my skill set. And now I see people saying, well, I'm not going to go work at a Medicaid clinic. I mean, I'm broke and entitled and a slob. And you want to hear the most racist thing in the world ever coming right out of my mouth? You know who has the problem the most in dentistry? Not the dentists that weren't born in America. I swear to God, if they were born anywhere in Africa, South America, or Asia, if she's from Brazil or Lagos or Taipei, holy moly, she's ready to work and she doesn't spend. But the scariest thing I ever hear from a dentist is I always say, oh, please, 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 where were you born? And they go, America. And I'm like, oh my God, they're not going to work 40 hours a week. They will own the land and building of their house before they own the land and building of their dental office. They will borrow money. And you come up to the American dentist and they're 50 years old and they're still paying interest on other people's money for their house and their car because they're so addicted to instant gratification, they couldn't even think of getting debt-free and paying cash. And on that note, thank you for what you're doing. And I think there will be a sense of urgency to what you're doing sooner rather than later, because I don't think this bubble's going to get, I mean, maybe it'll go on another year or two. I don't know, but all bubbles pop.
Mm-hmm. Howard, what I would say, I commend you for keeping your practice. I actually sold mine, and looking back, that was a mistake. But the problem was I was so burnt out that I had wanted out. If I could have done it again, I would have sold it. I would have hired somebody to do the stuff that I didn't like and just focus on stuff that I do like. But Howard, as I mentioned to you before we started, we do have an online course called the Infinite Wealth Course, where we could learn, you can see that video of the 15 versus 30, and also kind of learn some ways to create some passive income. And
you know what I would recommend? We put up 400 courses, and they've been viewed 1 million times. Guys like you that already have all this content, you should put one of your courses up for free on Dentaltown. So they have, because a lot of dentists won't take a course unless they get credit for it or whatever, but put one course up on Dentaltown so that everybody can meet you, meet the concepts, get to know you, and then they'll switch over to your platform for the next 100 courses. But that's a thought.
Well, I wrote that down. So thanks, Howard. What we have done, though, with our course, we're doing it more for education and not a revenue source. So people, for your client, for your listeners, if they go to infinitewealthconsultants.com/dentaltown, in there for a limited time, probably maybe till the end of the year, they can get free access to the course where they can learn about passive income, things to do for maybe long-term care, and that 15 versus 30-year mortgage.
Or you could take my financial course, which get a list of all the 80-year-old women in your community that are worth $1 million or more and are over 80 and are a widow. And then you can throw away Match.com, you can throw away Tinder. Just only date 80-year-old women that have $1 million in net, and that's my best advice.
I will write that down as well.
Hey, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was an honor to podcast you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Howard. It was a blast.